Hello, everyone, and welcome to the API Security Best Practices and Guidelines webinar presented to you by WSO2 Identity and Access Management team. So before we proceed with the presentation, so you can use your question tab in the control panel to ask any questions, and we will take it at the end of the webinar. Right. So I'm Omidu Ratnavira, and today I have my colleague Tanuja Jayasinghe, who's also joining with this webinar. A bit about this webinar series. The API Security and Beyond webinar series is a three-part webinar series that will deep dive into the importance of API security patterns, and how identity and access management can fit to your ecosystem. So this is the first webinar in this series and will be followed by 2 more webinars during the next month. Right. So a little bit about WSO2 integration platform. The WSO2 integration platform.
Sorry to interrupt. Your slides are not moving.
Okay, sure. Sorry.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks,
Brian. Yeah. Cool. So a bit about WSO2 integration platform. The WSO2 integration platform provides products and solutions to cater your advanced and complex business integration needs. The platform consists with WSO2 API Manager, which is capable of full API lifecycle management, WSO2 Enterprise Integrator to address complex application and data integration requirements, and WSO2 Identity Server to cater identity and access management requirement for your organization. Our products are fully open source and licensed under Apache 2. Additionally, we also have a WSO2 Open Banking solution, which is a technology platform to cater global open banking requirements. So an exciting news about WSO2 Identity Server. So we have been recently named as a strong performer in customer identity and access management by the recent Forrester CIM Web. So we have managed to score highest marks for different categories under the current product offering and strategies. So do visit our website and download a copy of the report and read more on why WSO2 Identity Server is rated as a strong performer. So moving on to capabilities of WSO2 Identity Server. So we do have a wide range of features, including Identity Federation, SSO, MFA, adaptive strong authentication, user management, user consent management, progressive profiling and identity analytics, regulatory compliance, and a complete REST API supportable product. Right. So let's start with the content of this webinar. Let's dive into what APIs and API security is. So APIs are nothing new. So it has been one of the key driving forces in digital transformation, enabling the companies to grow their businesses quickly than ever before. APIs offer the potential to increase revenue, extend customer reach and value, support sales and marketing activities, stimulate business and technical innovation, ease the integration of backend data and application. As businesses are getting rapidly digitalized, there's a tendency towards adopting an API-first strategy where everything you build within the enterprise ecosystem is started with an API that delivers a direct and an indirect business value to the company. However, with this widespread adoption of APIs throughout the world has provided a new and an attractive target for attackers that hasn't been thoroughly exploited yet. So to put things into perspective, in one of the recent reports, Gartner has mentioned that APIs will become the #1 attack vector by 2022. So it is crucial to have a solid API security strategy for your organization. Let's talk about API security. So API security involves securing data end-to-end, which includes security from a request originating from the client, passing through the network, reaching the server and the backend. So while APIs are a key element in the modern businesses, it can be also a major liability if they are not properly secured. These security vulnerabilities can lead to theft of sensitive data such as medical, financial, and personal information, also can lead to data manipulation, and can even result in unavailability of core business functionalities, causing financial losses. So API security is not just about access control to the API. It should consider privacy. It should detect of attacks and have a strategy to take corrective measures against these attacks. So yeah, the nature of the APIs differ from company to company, right? So organization, it depends on your organization. So any implementation of API security needs to be specific to your APIs and that the data you are dealing with. So some of the aspects that you should consider for your API strategies can be as follows. So who is the intended audience for your APIs? It can be public. It can be the API access can be public, so which enables anonymous users or registered customers to access them. It could include employees, meaning that APIs are exposed internal to your network, and it could be also partners. So basically trusted parties which can access these APIs. So it's important to identify the intended audience for your APIs. Then, so who is accessing the API? So this can be, is it a human user, where a user logs to the application and the application itself accesses the API on behalf of the user? Or is it a system where user is irrelevant, the application accesses the API as a trusted subsystem? So next thing is, how are these APIs accessed? So that also we should take into consideration. So who really has the control of the environment which the APIs are accessed? So it could be a web application. So in that scenario, end user does not have a complete control over the environment which the web APIs are accessed. So there we have the option to securely store the application keys. So then there can be mobile applications or single page applications where end user has the total control over the execution environment of the API. So we really should consider this as untrusted clients. So we should not bake API keys into the system, the application themselves. Right, so moving on, so the other aspect that we should consider is how the trust bootstrap should be done. So it can be direct, the trust can be in a direct manner where a user authenticates directly with the API and the API knows how to authenticate the user. So for the simplest example would be authenticating to the API with username and password, right? The trust can be brokered also, right? So the API itself does not trust each and individual user. Rather, it trusts a credential issued by a third party. So for example, if you think options like logging with Facebook or Google, these can be categorized as brokered trust bootstrap, right? So the other aspect that we should take into consideration is what are the data we are dealing with. So we should clearly identify what data to collect and minimize the data collection as much as possible. The more data you have, the larger the impact will be in the event of a data breach. So same rule applies to the data exposed through these APIs. So unless it should be limited to the bare minimum information for the functionality of the application. Right. So now we have an idea about the factors to be considered while implementing a security strategy for your API ecosystem. So next we'll dive into some most commonly API security vulnerabilities identified throughout. Right. So this OWASP API Security Top 10. So the OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project, or OWASP, it's an international nonprofit organization dedicated to web API, web application security. So, so they have openly available security materials, which has been helping the organizations globally to adapt and implement security best practices. The API Security Top 10 is one of the projects carried out by OWASP, focusing the most common vulnerabilities in API security. So let's have a look what these vulnerabilities are in detail. Right. So the first vulnerability is broken object level authorization. So API tends to expose endpoints that handle object identifiers. So this creates a wide attack surface, right? So attackers can substitute ID of their resource in API call with an ID of resource belonging to another user. So if there are proper authorization checks are not in place, the attacker will be able to access the other user's resources. So as you can see in this diagram, we can see that the attacker simply enumerates the API user ID and able to get the data of that user. So mitigation of this attack, so we have to implement authorization with user policies and hierarchy, and you should not rely on the IDs sent from the client, rather use the ID stored in the authenticated session, right? So and also you can check authorization each time there is a client requesting to access a database. And as an additional measure, you can use randomize, so randomize non-guessable IDs such as UUIDs. Right. So moving on to this second item, so broken authentication. So authentication mechanisms are often implemented incorrectly. So this allows attackers to compromise authentication tokens or to exploit implementation flows to assume other users' identities. So this can be temporary or permanently. Right? So there's multiple ways this can be exploited. So some of them are like weak authentication, which does not industry best practices, or like weak or not rotating the API keys. So default passwords that are weak or stored in plain text or poorly hashed manner. So weak password policies enabling brute force attacks and credential stuffing. Sending credential and sensitive information in URLs. Lack of proper token validation. I'm using unsigned or weakly signed keys. Missing validation on token expiration or due to non-expiring or long-living tokens, broken authentication scenarios can happen, right? So let's see how these scenarios can be mitigated. So first of all, you have to check all possible ways to authenticate to all APIs. So you should have an idea how this API can be, what are the possible options for this API to be authenticated. And use industry standards and best practices for authentication, and such as like strong authentication, adaptive risk-based authentication, or multi-factor authentication, and use best practices with token or password generations as well as storage. And try to use short-lived tokens as much as possible, and not just the users, authenticate your applications as well, so you know which application is trying to access the API. And additionally, you can enforce authentication policies such as rate limiting for authentication, and account lockout mechanisms upon failed login attempts, and check weak passwords during authentication. So those are some of the mitigation strategies you can follow for broken authentication, right? So moving on, the next item, the next API security vulnerability is identified as excessive data exposure. So APIs exposing a lot more than the client legitimately needs, and relying on the client itself to do the response filtering can lead to this sort of vulnerability. So the attackers can directly go to this API and get all the information from the API response itself, right? So this is primarily happening if so majorly this could happen if you are returning the full data object in your application side as as the API response to the client. So to mitigate it, so don't rely on clients to filter data. Make sure you review all responses and to what API consumers and adapt your responses to what the API consumers really need. So, and make sure error responses do not disclose unnecessary information to the outside, right? And also you can define schemas of all the API responses, as well as identify all the sensitive or personally identified information and justify its use. Right. So moving on, the next vulnerability is lack of resources and rate limiting. So if the API is not protected against excessive amount of API calls or not protected against large payloads, the attackers can use that to perform DDoS attacks, brute force attacks, or impact the API performance. Right. So this is a fairly common API security vulnerability where malicious bots bots or applications which continues to try to access your APIs. So to mitigate these vulnerabilities, implement rate limiting to your APIs and make sure the payload size limits are checked when processing responses. Also, the rate limiting can also be done to specific API methods and specific applications and specific users. Also, you can integrate with DDoS protection services to mitigate DDoS attacks. Also, you can also impose resource limitations if you're basically running on a production container system. You can limit container resources so it will not consume more than unnecessary amount of resources, which could potentially affect other containers as well. Right. So moving on. So the next vulnerability is broken function level authorization. So APIs which relies on clients to use user level or admin level APIs. So these are susceptible to this broken function level authorization. So attackers can figure out these hidden admin API methods and directly invoke these APIs bypassing the application. So if these administrative functions are exposed as APIs, non-privileged users can access these functions if they know how to access it. So this can be just a matter of knowing the URL or a different URL API context verb or a parameter. So in order to mitigate these vulnerabilities, so make sure not to rely on the application to enforce administrative access. So by default, deny all access to APIs and grant access based on specific roles. So basically implement role-based authorization for these APIs and properly design the authorization model, and thoroughly testing it also helps to mitigate these kind of attacks. Right. So moving on, the next vulnerability is mask assignment. So this is basically binding clients and request data to internal application data model without a proper payload filtering may lead to this sort of mask assignments. So either by guessing object properties or exploring other API endpoints, or by reading the documentation, an attacker can gain knowledge about the object properties and craft requests to modify object properties they are not supposed to modify, right? So in order to mitigate these mask assignment attacks, make sure not to automatically bind incoming data to your internal application object model, right? So, and explicitly define all parameters and payloads you are expecting in the request. So for object schemas, make in the object schema level, make the object properties read only where necessary. And also you can precisely define at design time the schema, the types, the patterns you will accept in the request, and you should enforce that schemas during runtime execution. Right. So the next is also another common security vulnerability, right? So this is basically poor configuration of your API server overall. So where attackers can exploit, allowing the attackers to exploit the system. So this configuration can include unpatched systems, unprotected files and directories, unhardened images like container images, or missing, outdated or misconfigured TLS configurations, exposed storage or server management panels, missing course policy or security headers, or that sort of misconfigurations can lead to these vulnerabilities. So in order to mitigate, so make sure you have a repeatable hardening and patching process in your organization, right? So and have an automated process to locate configuration flows in your APIs, and include only the necessary features and disable any other unnecessary features in the system, and restrict administrative access and have things get executed in a restricted environment, right? So moving on, so the next one is again another common security vulnerability. This is a injection. So attackers here the attackers construct API calls that include commands that the API or the backend behind it blindly executes. So attackers can send malicious inputs that can trick the interpreter into executing unintended commands or accessing data without proper authorization. So these input may include SQL commands, or NoSQL, LDAP, or other operating system related commands to gain an unauthorized access to data. So in order to mitigate this injection vulnerability, so do not trust API consumers input, right? So even if it's internal. And again, define schemas, types, and patterns for all input data, and make sure you validate them. And always filter and sanitize all incoming data before passing to the backend, right? So the next vulnerability is improper asset management. So here, attackers gain access, or attackers find non-production versions of the API, such as it can be a staging environment, testing, or a legacy version that may be very well protected. And attackers can use those unprotected or less protected APIs to launch attacks. So this can be mainly due to, like, in most cases, having to maintain backward compatibility forces organizations to leave old APIs running, right? So these old or non-production versions may not be properly maintained, and the endpoints may still have access to production data as well. So once an attacker authenticates with one of these endpoints, they can switch to others and carry on the exploit. So let's see the proper mitigation practices for the asset management related attacks. So keep an inventory of all hosts and your APIs, and limit access to anything that should not be public, and have APIs, firewalls, or VPNs put in place where necessary, right? And most importantly, also segregate access to production and non-production data, and limit access to production data, right? Also, you should have a proper mechanism to retire, or like a proper deprecation strategy for your old API versions, and make sure if there are deprecated APIs, make sure to backport any security fixes applied to your system. Right. So moving on to the last identified API security vulnerability. So this is insufficient logging and monitoring. So lack of proper logging, monitoring, and alerting system lets attackers to go unnoticed, right? So things may further complicated if the logs are not protected for integrity as well, or if the logs are not integrated into a security information and event management system, or if a proper or a sophisticated alerting and incident response management system is not implemented in your organization, the effects of this insufficient logging and monitoring attacks will be severe, right? So in order to mitigate, so make sure to log failed attempts, especially like access deny request or failures in input validation or any failure in security policy violations. And so treat logs as sensitive data and protect them, and include enough details in the logs to identify attackers and have them properly formatted to be in a way that it can be consumed by other log analytics tools, right? And avoid having sensitive data in logs. So if you need to have any sensitive information for debugging purposes, so maybe like include it in a partial or a redacted manner or hash where it could be applicable. And integrate with CI SIEM solutions, like where you can monitor and set up alerts based on suspicious activity. Right. So as you may have noticed, like most of these attacks or issues can be mitigated by leveraging on a sophisticated API management solution, along with the key management or an identity access management solution. So, and rest of these could be achieved by strictly following deployment best practices, as well as coding or programming development best practices. So moving on, like let's see how how we can mitigate or like address these issues, API security issues with O 2.0. So Tanuja, over to you.
Yeah. So thanks, Amidu. Well, hello everyone. So today I will be walking you all through the aspects of API security with OAuth 2.0. Let's start with a story. Imagine one day you went for groceries and you parked your car near the store. When you got back from the store, you noticed that someone had hit your car. At a glance, you saw some paint scratches on your car. So you took your car to the auto repair shop and handed over the key. Well, young Vin Diesel, one of the mechanics who works there, saw your car and thought it will be the perfect opportunity to practice some drifts. So this is a problem faced by car owners, mostly having high-end ones. When they pass their regular key to the parking attendant or to a mechanic, there is no control over what they can do with your car. So the car manufacturers introduced the valet key. So this valet key concept is to have a special key which allows the drivers to perform limited functionality under restriction. So when the valet key is used, it will keep a speed limit, lock the storage areas, disable the infotainment system, and even record the trip. So you know what exactly where your car was driven when you were not in it. So this is not a problem limited to car owners. On the web, we see many new web applications offering services which depend on other web resources. As an example, a food review app may allow you to publish your reviews on the social media, access your contact list, and see who is also in the same map. These are all great features users can have, but in order to do that, the app will require to have the credential for the other web service. When you share that credential with this particular application, you are not just giving the access to the share post. Instead, you will be giving the full control of your account. Now they can do anything they wanted with your account, even changing your password. Sounds scary, right? So that is why we have marked this as a password anti-pattern. So what is the solution? IET4 Internet Engineering Task Force introduced OAuth 2.0 in 2012 to enable applications to obtain limited access to services on behalf of resource owner without sharing the resource owner credential with the application. We get this access through something called an access token, which is a temporary credential with a limited scope. How to obtain an access token and its usage explained in RFC 6749 and RFC 6750. In RFC 6749, it has explained 4 ways of getting an access token, which are referred to as grant types. First one is authorization code grants, which can be used for web apps and native apps. The second one is implicit grants, also has the similar usage, mostly used in JavaScript-based application. Then the password grant, which is planned as a migration strategy to move from credential share into OAuth2, but we saw it was getting used for first-party application as well. Next is client credential, which is used for server-to-server authentication. Also later, they have introduced the RFC 8628 device authorization grant to handle browserless or input constrained device flow. Then the RFC 6750, it explains how to use bearer tokens in HTTP requests to access protected resource. Basically, you add it in the authorization header or as a request body parameter or as an URI query parameter. I assume most of you are familiar with OAuth2 grant flows, but I will quickly go through the authorization code flow to refresh your memories. In here, first web application initiate the flow by redirecting the user to authorization server with the application client ID. Then the authorization server verifies the client ID and prompts the login page for the user. After authentication, the user redirects back to the application with authorization code. Then the application uses this authorization code and application credential to get the access token. Then the application can use this token to access the protected resource. Okay, let's fast forward to 2020. So many things have changed over the last 8 years when it comes to APIs. JavaScript is now everywhere. It even reached the space with the recent SpaceX Dragon launch. This wide adoption of JavaScript also accelerated by having the support for CORS from almost all browsers, which was not there when the OAuth2 specs was initially released. So nowadays, everyone is developing their new web application as JavaScript-based single-page application. Also, we saw a huge rise in the native app world with the introduction of the Apple App Store and Android Play Store. And we have many smart devices which are connected to the internet, but do not have web browser or display as well. Furthermore, even OAuth2 is designed to share resources with third-party application. First-party application also adopted the same strategy, considering the advantages offered by OAuth 2.0. Things were not always perfect for the OAuth protected APIs. Over the past few years, we saw some major security incidents as well. Some of the incidents involve leakage of client credentials. Most notable incidents is Twitter Auth API key leakage in 2013. Twitter consumer keys and consumer secrets are embedded in every application that uses Auth, whether it's a native application or mobile application. Since the application is delivered to the user, consumer key and the secret can be extracted fairly easy by anyone with basic reverse engineering skill. So someone did it and put them in the GitHub. Then there were many phishing attacks as well. One of the notable one is Gmail phishing attack in 2017. In that case, the attacker created a fake app called Google Docs and sent the invitation to field. In the consent window, this application requests the read, send, and delete access to your email and access to your contact list. When the user approves it, this fake application uses that user's contact list to send more invitation. As they are coming from a trusted party, now others also accepting that, and it went viral. So the Google engineer has to step in and revoke that fake application fees. But it didn't resolve the original problem, so they have improved the application verification process to avoid such situation in the future. Also, we saw stolen authorization code and token situation. This is a common one that happened mostly due to poor security consideration during the application development. In 2018, Facebook View as feature implementation resulted in 50 million user accounts being breached. According to the Facebook announcement, the attackers were able to steal Facebook access token from code attached to the View as feature and use the token to take over user account as well. Next, redirect URI interception. This mostly affects the mobile application, since multiple application can be registered as a handler for specific redirect URI. A malicious client could also register itself as a handler for the same URI scheme that legitimate application handle. If this happens, it is a possibility that operating system will pass that URI to the malicious client. So we will have an authorization code leak in that case. Also, we tend to have a regular expression configured as redirect URI in IDP for some applications to support multiple clients. There was a case few years ago called covert redirect, in which attackers use this to send the authorization code to a different party without breaking the redirect URI validation logic. The next one is in 2015, researchers identified that there is a critical issue in JWT libraries. In JWT, there is a signature algorithm called none. When the algorithm is set to none, libraries ignore the signature validation. So now the attacker can forge and send a JWT token with the signature algorithm as none and get the access to protected API resource. After this discovery, libraries were updated to not to read the algorithm from the JWT, instead get it from the configuration. Over the years, we have improved specification to tighten security. Security consideration include in the OAuth2 core specification, thread model, and security consideration specification. Security consideration included in the native app specification, and security based current practice draft are some of them. Now we are in a situation where we have the experience and extensions to provide more secure implementation for OAuth 2.0. But they are scattered to many different specifications. So we need some consolidation effort to improve the developer experience. So one of the OAuth working groups working on the OAuth 2.1 draft. So OAuth 2.1 is a consolidation of many specifications. Auth2 core spec, bearer token spec, native app spec, and PKC, and browser-based apps BCP, and security BCP. In summary, PKC is required for all auth clients using the authorization code flow. Previously, it was suggested to different auth clients in different specs like native app BCP, browser-based app BCP, but now every authorization code flow needs to have it. Redirect URI to URIs must be compared using exact stream matching. This is to avoid the security vulnerability, which I have explained in the previous slide. The implicit grant is omitted from this specification. This grant is added due to a browser limitation at that time, and with the course it is no longer there, and we no longer need this. In the original specification also, this is considered as a less secure grant, and that is why refresh token is not available for this grant. Also, token leakage is quite possible with this grant, so it is removed from this draft considering all these security factors. The resource owner passed grant credential, resource owner passed credential grant is omitted from this specification as well, because this exposes user credentials to the application. Even if it is a first party or trusted application, this will increase the attack surface. Also, multi-factor authentication or passwordless authentication is not possible with this. Then the bearer token usage omits the use of bearer token in query strings of URIs, because it can lead to token leakages. Finally, refresh token for public clients must either be sender constraint or one-time use. This is to improve the security of the refresh token. Okay. Now it is much simpler to work with. In summary, you can't use password grant or implicit grant, and you can't send tokens in URI query parameters. So in Auth 2.1, we can use authorization code grant with PKC, and client credential grant can be used for server-to-server authentication, and we can send access token as request header field or request body parameter. Let's have a look at the authorization code grant flow with PKC. In the beginning, the application creates and stores a secret name code verifier, and then it hashes the code verifier and gets the code challenge from it. Next, it will pass the code challenge and code challenge method attributes along with other organization request attributes to the authorization server. Authorization server responds in a normal fashion, but it stores the code challenge and code challenge method attributes. Then the application sends the authorization code in the access token request as usual, but includes the code verifier secret, which is generated earlier. Apart from the usual validations, the authorization server calculates the code challenge values from the received code verifier attribute using code challenge method. Then it is validated against the received one in the authorization request. Any attacker who intercepts the authorization code is unable to redeem it for an access token, as they are not in a possession of the code verifier secret. So far, we have covered how to protect the token acquiring flow. Let's move to the API invocation part. So we have to consider few items. First one is scopes and resources. The scope is a mechanism in Auth2 to limit the application access to users protected API resource. An application can request one or more scopes. This information is presented to the user in the consent screen, and the access token is issued to the application will be limited to the scopes granted. The auth spec allows the authorization server or user to modify the scope granted to the application compared to what is requested. Scope is typically about what access being requested, but it is sometimes overloaded to convey the location or identity of the protected resource. However, doing so isn't always feasible or desirable. Resource indicators spec RFC 8707 is introduced. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I was talking about the RFC 8707, which is introduced for the client to explicitly signal to the authorization server where it intends to redeem the access token it is requesting. We can include multiple resource parameters in the authorization request to notify authorization server about them. Then the token types and validations. So let's first decide what type of token is required for your API. Here we can have two types of token. Reference token, where you always need to go to the authorization server for validation, and JWT, which is self-contained and can be validated without the help of authorization server. If you need a multi-region deployment or high concurrency, JWT token makes sense, but it has some disadvantages also. The main one is we can't revoke it like we do for the reference token. So for critical operation, it will be a good idea to introspect the JWT. Then we need to decide on the validity period. There are several factors govern this decision. First one is user. User can be system admin, app developer, or an app consumer. Based on user privileges, we can decide the validity period. Even refresh token is even the refresh token is allowed or not allowed for them. Higher the privileges, less validity period is allowed. So also we need to decide based on the operation asset. If it is a transaction, having one-time token for the specific transaction will be a good idea. Rich authorization request, or RA, is a draft which we can use to specify fine-grained authorization requirement in the authorization request. As an example, if that specification is used, we can mention the transaction ID in the authorization request and get access token specific to that transaction. Based on the go-to factor, we can decide whether to provide refresh token or not as well. Okay, the security enforcement for it. Most common one is API gateway pattern. In this way, all the traffic will go through an API gateway like WS2 API manager, and the scopes and other validations like validity period, all those things will be enforced there. Okay, let's recap. So in this presentation, we talked about API security and security consideration, and we also talked about common API security vulnerabilities. Then we talked about how to secure APIs with OAuth 2.0, and we talked about what's new in OAuth 2.1, and finally we talked about things to consider when protecting API invocations. Okay, now it's the question time. So you can there's an option in your right hand side, I think, in the panel. So here you can ask any questions. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So there's quite a number of questions. We'll try to go through them as swiftly as possible. So I'll take the first one. So APIs are accessed by third-party application. Hence, how does the security change? So it does not specifically like per se, the security does not change per se, right? So basically, even if it's third-party application or not, so when the application is accessing the APIs, there should be some sort of a security credential which should be presented along with that API request, right? So this credential, or this can be most probably, if it's in the modern application systems, it will be most probably an OAuth token or JWT token, so which can be obtained from a trusted identity provider. So basically, as long as the API gateway and this identity provider has a trust relationship, the API calls the third-party application can present a token issued by the identity provider to the API and get access to the necessary APIs. All right, so there's a bunch of questions related to session recordings, and so yeah, obviously the sessions will be recorded, so we'll let you know the information at the end of the webinar. Okay, so this can you take one or two?
There's another question called, is all 2.1 a draft yet? Yes, I think it's only have like a one, well, it is like version 0 is there, like so it's just a draft right now.
So there's a question on, in case if the situation, if the API, sorry, is how to disable API key. So it depends on your key management service. So you can simply like, so most, not most, but at least WSO2 Identity Server has the capability to refresh your API secret. So there's no, like once that is refreshed, you'll have to go ahead and change it in your application side as well, like in case if that API secret is application secret is breached. So but the refresh capability is there in the product. So what is
another question? So like what are the benefits of using JWT? How can we overcome JWT validation, revoke token issues with JWT? So the like most important advantages are like if you have the JWT, the validation is local. You don't need to go for the authorization introspect endpoint. So you can just do the local validation by validating the signature and like body content. So like so the validation happen locally. So the like in the next question, like and if it is a multi-region deployment, so like you can actually like instead of going for like a reference one, because it's like then the like DBs need to be synced like that. But if you use the JWT, you only rely on the signature. So even if it is a multi-region deployment, you can use the same token. And like in the revoke token case, like usually the servers keep a reference for the like JWT, not they don't store the like entire JWT, but when the authorization server issuing the token, they keep a reference for them, and like when it is revoked, we mark it that reference is like in the server side, it keeps it as a revoke. So like if it is that operation is like a critical one, it's always better to go for the introspect, and if you introspect the JWT token, you will receive it is as a revoked one. Yeah.
Right. So there's a question on where's the reference of the OSP information in URL. So again, this will be shared along with the presentation slide deck, so you can or either you can simply like do a quick Google search, and you'll be able to find the resources. So there's another question on this. OWASP also covers the bot attacks, AIML. So DDoS protection is addressed for a certain extent, but I'm not quite sure whether AI or ML algorithms aspect is considered in that. Other question is OWASP security only limits to layer 7. What about other layers? Those to be covered for API as well. So this particular project we discussed only about the API security best practices, but OWASP has a variety of security resources available in their website, which covers different aspects of security. So that is not limited to layer 7. If you visit their site, you should be able to find this information.
So there's another question: when you saw 2.1 will be general available, do we have migration path from OAuth 2.0 to 2.1? Actually, all the specs related to OAuth 2.1 is available right now. Only the security BCP and the web app, like browser-based web app BCP are the in the draft stage. But if you in your application if you have the authorization code grant PKC, you are good. And so it will be the same for the OAuth 2.1 as well. And if you are using password grant or implicit grant, it's better to move to the authorization code grant. So because we have the implicit grant can be covered with the public grant option, and we need to avoid password grant as well. So there is no new things in the OAuth 2.1. It will be a consolidation of current existing best practices and available extensions, and the best thing from the the good things taken from the OAuth core as well.
So Tanuja, I think we are almost
there.
Right. So if there are any unanswered question, I think we can get back to you with the answers. Yeah. So I think we are in place to wrap things up.
Okay, thank you guys.
Okay, so thank you very much. So as I mentioned, the webinar recording will be and the webinar recording, the presentation slides, as well as the advanced API security book will be sent to you via the mail. Also, at the end of this webinar, you will see a question on screen. We appreciate if you can take a second and answer that to understand your requirement better. So hope you learned something valuable during this webinar. Hope you'll join the next webinars in the series. Goodbye and take care.